My ex-wife, Lauren, and I have been divorced for about 7 years now. We share custody of our 14-year-old son Mason, and up until recently, things had been relatively smooth. I thought we were managing co-parenting reasonably well. Emails, texts, the occasional disagreement, but nothing major. That all changed 2 weeks ago. Lauren remarried about a year ago to a guy named Travis. He has a daughter, Kylie, who's 2 years younger than Mason. I've met Travis a handful of times at family gatherings, and while he seems nice enough, I've noticed that Mason and Kylie don't exactly click. Mason tends to keep to himself around her, and Kylie can be a little assertive. It's not malicious, just kids asserting their territory, I suppose. What pushed everything over the edge was discovering that Lauren had taken money from Mason's savings account. Yes, she stole it, and not for anything reasonable. She used it to fund a weekend getaway for her new stepdaughter, Kylie. Mason had been saving up for months to buy a gaming PC he'd been dreaming about. It wasn't a tiny amount either. Lauren managed to drain nearly $2,500 from his account. I only found out because Mason confronted me, trembling and almost in tears, telling me he couldn't log into his account anymore. He didn't understand what had happened, only that all his hard-earned money, plus birthday gifts and part-time earnings, had vanished. At first, I thought it was a bank error. But Mason had screenshots, text messages Lauren had sent to Kylie hinting at the surprise, and even a receipt for a luxury hotel. When Mason confronted Lauren, she told him to stop being dramatic and said, "He's your brother now too, so you should be happy he gets something special." She tried to frame it like it was some noble sacrifice for family unity. I could see the confusion and hurt in Mason's eyes, and it broke me. He had been so proud of saving that money, and his own mother had taken it without a word. I called Lauren immediately. At first, she laughed it off, saying, "Mason doesn't need to worry about money. I'm helping him learn generosity." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Helping him learn generosity? She stole thousands from him. She told me that she had always intended to pay him back eventually, and that I was blowing this out of proportion. But Mason wasn't just hurt financially, he felt betrayed. And honestly, so did I. I knew I had to take action. I couldn't just sit back and let her ruin Mason's trust, and worse, set a precedent that it was okay to steal from him because family comes first. So I started gathering evidence, bank statements, screenshots, messages, and receipts. I also tried talking to Travis, hoping he could reason with her, but he was oblivious to the full extent of what had happened. He seemed genuinely surprised and promised to help, but I wasn't sure he understood the emotional impact on Mason. Over the next few days, Mason refused to go back to Lauren's house. He stayed with me, sleeping on the couch in the living room, barely eating, barely speaking, just staring at the empty piggy bank where his savings used to be. And every time his phone buzzed with a message from Lauren, he'd flinch. It was like the mother he had known had disappeared overnight, replaced with someone unpredictable and unreliable. I was angry, but I had to stay calm for Mason's sake. I knew I couldn't let Lauren's actions define our family dynamics, but I also had no idea how far this was going to escalate. After the initial confrontation, Lauren didn't back down. Instead, she started messaging me nonstop, half apologetic and half demanding, insisting that I was alienating Mason from his family and that I was making everything a bigger deal than it actually is. She tried to frame it like I was the villain for protecting our son. Every notification from her made Mason tense up, and honestly, it started wearing me down too. Things got worse when Lauren involved her parents. They called me a few days later, trying to guilt-trip me into letting Mason return to her mother's house and saying I was overreacting. I tried to explain calmly that this wasn't about denying Mason time with his mom, it was about protecting him from having his money stolen and his trust violated. They didn't see it that way. To them, Lauren's generosity toward her stepdaughter somehow justified taking money from Mason. I wanted to scream. Meanwhile, Mason was shutting down emotionally. He started skipping school lunches because he didn't want anyone to know about what happened, and he barely spoke about anything other than video games or school assignments. He would glance at his empty savings jar and mutter, she just doesn't get it." It crushed me to see him so defeated. Lauren began escalating in more subtle ways. She sent Mason gifts and treats with notes implying that he should be grateful for her generosity, even though these were little bribes compared to what she had taken. She called Mason selfish for not appreciating family sacrifices and tried to manipulate him into thinking that Travis and Kylie were his new family, like his feelings about the theft didn't matter. Mason, confused and hurt, would come to me afterward, trying to reconcile his anger with guilt, which was exactly what Lauren wanted. Then came the moral dilemma. Lauren's parents suggested I consider letting it go because Mason could learn forgiveness and it would help Lauren get along with her new family. I wrestled with it. Part of me wanted to take the high road for Mason's sake, but every time I looked at him, I saw betrayal and confusion. Could I really ask him to forgive someone who had taken months of hard work from him? Could I sit back and let him learn that his feelings didn't matter? The answer was no. At this point, I reached out to Travis directly. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I needed someone to understand the full picture. He was shocked. Travis said he had no idea Lauren had taken Mason's savings and that he wouldn't have allowed it if he had known. He agreed that Mason's money should be returned immediately and promised to speak with her. But as soon as he tried, Lauren twisted it around, blaming him for not standing up to me sooner and accusing me of poisoning him against her. It was exhausting. Amid all this, I started noticing patterns in Lauren's behavior that worried me. She would swing from calm and charming to erratic and irrational in moments, seemingly without reason. She would fabricate little stories about Mason misbehaving or exaggerate events to make herself look like the victim. It was subtle at first, but the longer it went on, the more I realized that Mason wasn't just dealing with stolen money. He was dealing with emotional manipulation, gaslighting, and instability from the person he should trust most. I began to fear that this wasn't just a one-time incident. Lauren's actions were systematic, and Mason was caught in the middle. He couldn't trust her, and worse, he was starting to doubt himself. Every time she called him ungrateful or selfish, I could see his small shoulders slump a little more, his confidence eroding. I hated that I couldn't protect him from every single word or action, but I knew I had to try. That night, after Mason went to bed, I sat down and made a list. All the money taken, all the messages, all the evidence of manipulation. I had to prepare because this wasn't going to stop on its own. Something had to change before Mason lost more than just his savings. He was already losing trust in his own mother, and that was something I couldn't let happen. A week later, things took an unexpected turn. Travis came to my house unannounced. At first, I was cautious. He hadn't really involved himself before, but he seemed genuinely concerned this time. Once Mason went to his room, Travis leaned in and quietly said, "There's something you need to know about Lauren, something she hasn't told anyone." I listened, tense. Travis explained that Lauren had recently been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, something she'd been struggling with for years but had only recently come to terms with after seeing a therapist. Her parents had known, but she refused treatment consistently, skipping appointments, ignoring medications, and pushing everyone away when they tried to intervene. That explained the sudden, erratic escalation, the theft, the manipulations, the mood swings. It wasn't just bad behavior or spite, it was a pattern tied to a mental health issue she had been neglecting. Travis told me more. The party for Kylie wasn't just about generosity or family bonding, it was an attempt by Lauren to seek approval, a way to win at being a parent again, to prove she could do something grand and impressive. He said she had been obsessed with controlling appearances for years, and that the act of taking Mason's savings was impulsive but calculated, an adrenaline rush that momentarily gave her a sense of power and control she desperately craved. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. On one hand, understanding the why helped me see her as more than just a villain. On the other, it didn't change what she had done to Mason. He had been betrayed by his own mother, and nothing about her disorder excused that. The next day, Mason and I had a long talk. I explained that his mother had a condition that sometimes made her act unpredictably, and that it wasn't his fault or mine, but that we needed to protect ourselves until she got help. Mason listened quietly, processing it, and I could see a flicker of relief. Finally, someone was explaining it in a way that made sense to him, that didn't make him feel guilty for feeling hurt and angry. I reached out to Lauren again, calmly this time, documenting everything and making it clear that Mason's savings had to be returned immediately. Surprisingly, she didn't argue. Instead, she sent a cryptic message about trying to make amends but gave no timeline. I knew this wasn't reliable. She had promised before and failed, but at least there was a hint she understood she had crossed a line. Meanwhile, Travis kept checking in on Mason. He apologized repeatedly for not noticing earlier and reassured him that Mason's feelings mattered. Seeing Mason begin to trust another adult again, it wasn't his mother, but someone trying to do the right thing, was incredibly heartening. Mason smiled for the first time in days when Travis offered to take him to a local arcade. Just the two of them, no drama. The emotional weight on me, though, was exhausting. Watching your child be manipulated by someone they love is terrifying. Mason had started withdrawing, sleeping poorly, and asking questions like, "Why does mom always hurt me?" That was a question I didn't have a simple answer for. All I could do was validate his feelings and reassure him that I would always protect him. But the thought of Lauren coming back into his life, unpredictable as ever, loomed over me like a storm cloud. By the end of that week, I realized a legal approach was necessary. Shared custody as it stood would not keep Mason safe from further manipulations. I contacted my lawyer and prepared the initial steps for requesting full custody, documenting Lauren's instability, the theft, and the ongoing emotional manipulation. Mason was hesitant at first. He didn't want to lose his mom. But after we talked about safety and trust, he agreed it was the right step. For the first time since the incident, I felt a small measure of control. We weren't just reacting anymore. We were planning, protecting, and reclaiming some stability in our lives. And for Mason, that was the most important thing. A few days after filing for full custody, things escalated quickly. Lauren found out, and unsurprisingly, she was furious. She showed up at my front door unannounced, screaming and crying, accusing me of destroying her life and turning Mason against her. Mason, who had been quietly playing in his room, peeked out from the doorway, his face pale and anxious. I immediately told him to stay inside. He didn't need to witness her outburst. Lauren's tirade went on for nearly an hour. She alternated between sobbing and yelling, saying things like, "I've been trying so hard to be a good mom. You can't take him from me." And bizarrely, "This is all your fault. I've been pushed to this." I had to force myself to stay calm. I refused to get drawn into her chaos, but it was emotionally draining. Every accusation, every word of gaslighting felt like another stab at Mason. Her parents called shortly afterward. At first, I braced for another round of guilt tripping, but instead, they seemed resigned. They explained that they loved Lauren, but that they had seen this coming for a long time. They supported the idea of full custody, not because they didn't care for her, but because Mason's safety and mental health had to come first. Even Travis, after several discussions, reinforced that Lauren's instability was beyond her control and beyond his ability to manage. Mason and I began attending a few counseling sessions together. He needed support to process the betrayal and to rebuild trust in the adults around him. The therapist helped him articulate his feelings of anger, sadness, and confusion, and slowly, he started opening up about his fear of losing her mother completely. I reminded him repeatedly that safety and trust were more important than proximity, and that we could love her without allowing her actions to hurt him. Meanwhile, Lauren's behavior only intensified. She began sending passive-aggressive texts, leaving cryptic voicemails, and even showing up at school events unannounced, trying to assert her rights as a parent. Every encounter was emotionally volatile. I documented everything meticulously, knowing that the evidence would be crucial in court. Every stolen dollar, every manipulation, every outburst became part of the case we would present. During this time, a shocking revelation came to light. Travis told me in confidence that Lauren had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder several months prior, but had been refusing treatment. The therapist had informed him of her condition because it directly affected the children in her care, but Lauren had blocked communications and refused help. That explained her erratic behavior, her impulsive spending, and the manipulative patterns. It wasn't just malice, it was untreated mental illness. The custody hearing arrived faster than I expected. Lauren arrived with her parents and Travis, looking composed but clearly tense. Mason sat beside me, nervous but steadfast. During the proceedings, we presented detailed documentation of her theft, manipulations, and unstable behavior, along with therapist reports and Travis's statements. Lauren's defense was chaotic. She alternated between claiming she was a good mother and implying that I was trying to alienate Mason from her. The judge listened carefully, asking pointed questions and reviewing the evidence. By the end of the hearing, the judge ruled in our favor. Mason would stay with me full-time until Lauren could demonstrate stability and commitment to her treatment plan. The ruling included a structured visitation schedule contingent upon Lauren attending therapy, taking prescribed medication consistently, and showing improved behavior. It was the best possible outcome given the circumstances. That evening, Mason and I went home exhausted but relieved. He hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for not letting her ruin me." I held him close, feeling a mixture of sorrow, relief, and determination. The battle wasn't over entirely. Lauren's condition and her emotional volatility would continue to affect us, but at least we had reclaimed some control and safety. The weeks after the custody ruling were calmer, but not without challenges. Lauren, to her credit, began attending therapy consistently and taking her medication. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of emotional volatility, but I could see progress. She even sent Mason a handwritten letter apologizing for taking his savings and for the hurt she'd caused. He read it cautiously, unsure how to feel, but I could tell he appreciated the effort. Mason started regaining his confidence slowly. He returned to his part-time job, restarted his savings plan, and even began talking about the gaming PC he dreamed of. I encouraged him to focus on his accomplishments and reminded him that people, even parents, can make mistakes. His therapist emphasized that rebuilding trust takes time, and we approached it gently. Lauren's parents and Travis became allies in this process, helping ensure that visits were calm and structured. Travis even volunteered to attend some sessions with Mason, acting as a buffer and a supportive adult he could trust. For Mason, knowing there were adults on both sides looking out for him made a huge difference. Over the next few months, Lauren and Mason slowly rebuilt some connection. He agreed to short, supervised visits, and while there were tense moments, he could see that she was genuinely trying. She made small gestures, sending him books she knew he'd enjoy, helping him with a school project, and talking openly about her mental health challenges. These actions, though small, were powerful. Mason began to understand that people can change, but trust has to be earned, not assumed. I also started to rebuild my own life. A colleague, Claire, who I had met months earlier, became a supportive presence. She has a son just a couple of years younger than Mason, and the kids quickly became friends. Over time, our households began to blend naturally. Claire and I talked about moving in together, and we're planning to do so by the end of the year. Seeing Mason smile and relax in a stable environment again has been priceless. Lauren eventually moved out of state for a fresh start, closer to her extended family, and promised to continue therapy and medication adherence. She and Mason keep in touch through calls and video chats, sharing small milestones and creative projects. It's not perfect, but it's a healthier dynamic than before. Looking back, I realize how fragile trust can be, between parents and children, between blended families, even within oneself. But I also learned that boundaries, preparation, and support systems are critical. Mason has learned to assert himself, understand his feelings, and recognize healthy relationships. Lauren has a chance to rebuild herself responsibly. And I've learned that protecting my child sometimes means making difficult, emotionally charged decisions, but those choices can lead to healing and stability. Today, our home feels safe again. Mason is thriving, I have a supportive partner, and while Lauren remains a part of our lives in a limited capacity, we have boundaries that protect everyone. It hasn't been easy, and it's far from perfect, but for the first time in months, I feel like we're moving forward, together. Hey everyone, it's been about a year since everything blew up with Lauren. Things are finally calm. Mason is thriving. He's saving again, doing well in school, and even talking about his future plans without fear or stress. The therapy really helped him process everything, and he's more confident than ever. Lauren moved out of state to be closer to her family and continues her treatment. She still calls Mason occasionally, and while he's cautious, he's learning to forgive in small ways. It's not perfect, but it's better than the chaos we were living in. On my side, I'm happy too. I'm in a strong relationship with Claire, and our blended families are bonding well. We're planning to move in together by the end of the year, and Mason gets along great with her son. Life finally feels stable again. Looking back, this whole ordeal was exhausting and painful, but it taught me so much about boundaries, trust, and protecting your child while still allowing space for growth and forgiveness. If anything, I hope Mason learns from it, and that Lauren keeps getting the help she needs. For now, I feel like we're finally moving forward. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.